It's time to talk about reading challenges. Hey everyone, it is Shannon, and I'm excited to talk about reading challenges today. I haven't done a reading challenge in a while, but as I've been watching people doing their wrap-up videos for the year and setting their goals for 2017, I've gotten excited about the possibility about doing another challenge, but then the question is, which one? There's so many, and I tend to make them myself, but I thought it might be fun to actually do one because then there's like a whole community of people that are also doing them. Often these have Goodreads groups and you can discuss the books or get ideas on what to read or go like, oh my gosh, why did we choose that? Like whatever it may be. And of course, always talk about it on YouTube as well. So anyway, what I did was when I was watching YouTube the other night, I just wrote down the first 4 challenges that I had heard people mention and I decided to look them up and then look into whether or not it was a challenge that I was excited about doing. So the 4 that I chose are the Book Riot Read Harder challenge, the Pop Sugar 2017 reading challenge, or I guess someone talked about doing it last year or something like that. And then the Read the World challenge, which was new to me, and then Around the World in 80 Books, which I had heard about before, but was one of the harder ones to get information on. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about each of the challenges, what their sort of setup is, and then we'll look at and then I don't know, maybe by the end of it I'll know which one I want to do or if I want to do all of them. Okay, so the Book Riot Read Harder challenge, this one is 24 books within the year. So the idea is you can read 2 a month or 2 a week and take the last 2 weeks off because one every 2 weeks is 26, so you get some 2 weeks off. But how that math isn't quite time. Oh yeah. Calendar math can sometimes be screwy. Anyway, so the Read Harder challenge, this one strongly promotes diversity. They also had a bunch of authors submit their own questions or parameters for the challenge. And one of the great things about the list on Read Harder is that they have links to posts with suggestions for titles. And this is especially good for if something is much more out of your comfort zone or out of like the things that you normally read, so you have somewhere to go to actually read the books or fulfill that challenge and expand your reading horizons. I think all of these are to expand your reading horizons. They say that specifically, and that's always something that I want to do every year. It's like is on my list, sort of as at the bottom, always expand my reading horizons. So I actually found the options in this one were pretty good. And the fact that they have some suggestions made me go, oh, okay. And the fact that it's 24 books, I also liked because I read a fair amount, but this, I think I could get in 24, reading some of the stuff I would already read and also expand my reading horizons, but not totally overwhelm the year. So I felt like it had a pretty good fit. And I am pretty familiar with Book Riot. It's the 0 to well read list is I've incorporated into my those books list, so I'm definitely already reading some books that they've recommended already. The next up is the Pop Sugar Challenge. Now this one they have it sort of in 2 stages. You can either read 40 books or you can go for overachiever mode and read 52 books. I do find that there are a lot of reading challenges on blogs and on Goodreads that have this format of you can do like level A or level B or level C. And often I find when people start talking like that, then they start talking in acronym and I'm not familiar with the acronyms and I'm just like, this is a whole other world. This is a whole other world. But anyway, not so much with this post. I actually found that this one, they also promote diversity a lot in their challenges or in their challenge items. And I thought this one was actually a lot of fun. They have ones that are pretty random, and I always think that that's fun because I think it's great to be intentional and sort of and literary and like eye-opening and important topics. I think those things are good, but it's also good to follow your nose, be a bit lighthearted, take a risk that doesn't have to be sort of like this big like precipice moment. Like you just try something and who knows, you might like it, right? Like it's just like there was a little lighter about this one that I appreciated. That being said, I'm not that familiar with Pop Sugar as a website, so I don't really know what their vibe is. I just know that my computer doesn't always like their website. So I don't often click things that go to Pop Sugar, and it feels a bit more, obviously, with the title, pop culture based. I don't know if they have lots of quizzes or if, like, it kind of has that vibe to it. So I'd want to, if I decided to do this one, I would just want to look at the site a little bit more and be comfortable with, being like, yeah, I'm going to talk about Pop Sugar. So I don't know. It feels a little over honest, but I hope not. I'm not saying anything bad about it. I'm just saying I don't know enough about it to be like, yeah, I want to do that. I'm curious about it. I'm curious about it. I thought it might be more YA oriented, but when I read the titles, I actually didn't find that to be the case. I actually didn't find any of these to be YA oriented. So I guess a lot of readers are NA now. Of the ones that came in through the YA boom. Oh, it's getting old, it's getting old. Okay, the next up is the Read the World challenge. Now this one actually is not, as far as I can tell, it's not actually a particular challenge. There is a woman and a writer named Anne Morgan, and she did this. She read the world in 2012, and she went with 196 countries, 195 that were sovereign states, identified, or the UN recognized as sovereign states, plus one that was previously part of the UN, so 196 places. And she decided to read a book from each of them in 1 year. Now that's a huge number of books. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 to 5 a week. I wouldn't be able to do that in a year. This for me would be more like a lifelong goal or a 5 to 10 years goal, and I actually am not sure how I feel about setting a goal that's that long, but I do love the idea of it. I love her site is really great. It lists all the countries, and she has suggestions of what she read with links to reviews if applicable and that kind of stuff. So that was really cool. There is also a Facebook group associated with it, and people do definitely do this, but I found that it came back to her doing this and she wrote a book about it. So it's also one of those weird, for me, sometimes it has a weird place of this is actually someone's personal and professional project, that came to life. So to do exactly the same things feels a little weird. But that doesn't mean it's not worth trying. It doesn't mean not worth modifying. It doesn't mean it's not worth incorporating, that kind of stuff. But it does feel like, wow, that's really specific. Like Chris Guillebeau, who traveled to each country of the year. If someone else did the exact same thing, that'd be a little weird. Although if they really wanted to do it, like, of course, there's nothing wrong with doing it. But like, I strongly identified that project with him. So there's something, I don't know. So there's something, but that being said, when I get to my stats, wow, that one was the most surprising. So yeah, Read the World. Do you do this? This one in particular, if anyone is familiar with this, or if there is a hub of people that do this, a community of people that do this, I must have just missed it in my searching. And then the next one is Around the World in 80 Books. Now this one I have heard people talk about as Around the World in 80 Books, like it's a thing. And then when I looked, I had a little trouble finding it again. Now there is a Goodreads group, and it does look like it originated somewhere else, but they used an acronym, and there was no link, so I don't know where it originated. And I definitely find one of those challenges sometimes with websites and things that get so in the culture of the self of the culture that when you start talking an acronym, and we say DNFing and all this stuff, but it was like when you're actually explaining something, it's like spell it. Anyway, from what I gather, it is the same idea as Read the World, except for there are some people that do this by traveling neighboring countries. So you can start Canada, US, Mexico, and then keep going down and then jump to another continent, work your way through. So you're trying to do one line around the world and come back. So that is the idea of it. I couldn't pull myself in stats on this one because you actually choose 80 of the countries. So the parameters just didn't fit for that one. So that one's probably less likely, although it'd be way more achievable than Read the World. So as I said, I did some statistics, and what I found was this is what I found. So I worked on with whether I was excited about the parameter, whether it was a stretch for me, whether I was resistant to it, or whether it was not new to me. Now, Book Riot, I was excited about 42% of the options, 21% of the options were a stretch, 17% of the options I had resistance, and 21% of the options were not new to me, things that I already do in reading. So that was actually pretty good. Being excited about 40% and a stretch being 20%, you're only dealing with sort of 17% feels like a high percentage for resistance, but I feel like that's 80% could manage and that other 20% undecided. Now, the Pop Sugar one, I did it for the 40 books and the 52 books, but I think I'll talk about 52 because that'd be most likely what I'd try to do. So I was excited about 33% of the titles, 25% of the options were a stretch, 29% I held resistance for, and 13% were not new to me, which is a little 30%, 29% resistance. That's pretty high. I can't remember what it was that was triggery or whatever. And then we have around the world. So this is working with 192 countries. I was excited about 32%. 50% of them would be a stretch, which is the highest out of any of these. I was resistant about 16%, and I was not, and 2% were not new to me. 2%. So out of internationally in the world, I only read 2%. And so that was really shocking to me. But it brings me to, and I didn't do the 80 days one because it'd be either the same as around the world, or read the world. I couldn't break out 80 out of 190, like the math just didn't work. Anyway, so, but the 2% really like opened my eyes a lot to say, wow, I don't read that much internationally. And so a lot of those books titles are international, but a lot of what I read is from Canada, the States, and the UK. And I do read outside that, but generally that's where I tend to read books from. So I definitely want to increase that, but it does come to one challenge in the challenge within the challenge is how do you define the country for a book? What do you use as a parameter? For me, that stumps me. Like, I read a lot of Canadian books, and often I pull those Canadian books from lists about Canadian books or awards about Canadian books. So I have a source, and if the author is Canadian, generally I consider it a Canadian book. So that brings it down to feeling like nationality of the author is what determines the country of the book. But then you get the case of when the book is actually about another country, you know, and then does it matter if it's fiction versus nonfiction? I don't know. I just don't know. So that one I do find that's where the challenge is the parameter of how do you define the country. But it does open my eyes and make me realize I would like to read more internationally. And out of all of these, I'll just let you know that my resistance level, stretch level is something that I'm curious about, but I don't know a lot about, and or I definitely would have to research it to achieve that level, to find a book from that country or that fit that parameter. So stretch doesn't necessarily mean I'm not interested, it just means that there's some work involved. And then I found that my resistance level was almost always to do with war and political conflict and racism, sexism, and genocide. So like those, for me, almost always when I said I was resistant to read something, it was to do with people being disempowered, war, those issues. So that came up with me all the time. And I generally don't read books that are involved that have those themes because I generally read for enjoyment, although I do like to increase my reading comprehension and, of course, lots of these challenges expand my reading horizon. So I have to think about that a little bit. Now, I don't know which one to do. I got to the end of this and I don't know which one to do. When I look at the numbers, both the Book Riot and the Pop Sugar one are pretty close in terms of how I feel about each of the different categories. Around the World in 80 Books, I would say is probably a no, just because if I was going to do that, I was going to go all out and do Read the World, although that's not an actual challenge anymore. Or is it? Or is it? So let me know what you think. How do you feel about reading challenges? Are you doing any of these reading challenges this year or for a longer term? Or are there any others that you would like to recommend that might fit what I am curious about or looking forward to, or more fun, or have great communities? Because I think one of the great things about a lot of these is that they have great communities, and the Book Riot, the Pop Sugar, and the Around the World in 80 Books all have Goodreads groups, and and that's a really great place to talk to people about books and get suggestions and make recommendations and all that good stuff. So let me know, what do you think about reading challenges? Do you like them? Are you taking the year off? What's your favorite? Let me know. I would love to hear. Okay, take care.